Observer was a game that I had my eye on during its development. It had all the signs of being a game that's right up my alley. It's cyberpunk, it has a visually striking and interesting world, and best of all, it's starring Rutger Hauer from my personal favourite movie, Blade Runner. But sadly, once it released, it seemed to get put into my backlog, as other games was holding my interest. But now I've gone back and finished Observer, so let's see how it turned out. The year is 2084 and the location is a dystopian Poland. The world is recovering from a digital plague called the nanophage, which took the lives of many and resulted in war as well as a rampant drug use. After the war, a megacorporation by the name of Chiron took control of the area. You take the role of Daniel Lazarski, a detective belonging to the unit known as Observers. In a world where technology has blurred the lines between what it means to be human or machine, people are a combination of both with bionic parts and implants. Observers are put in control of an area in which they hold a license to hack minds. With this being the case, observers are tasked with performing an advanced form of interrogation by hacking people's brain implants with a device called the Dream Eater. The Dream Eater creates a visual representation of the person's memories for the observer to piece together in any given crime that may have taken place without the need to ask questions. One day, Daniel gets a mysterious call from his son that he's fallen out of contact with. When tracing the call, it leads him to a tenement building, and this is where the journey begins. Observer is essentially a walking simulator, but with it being set in a dystopian city, it opens a few more possibilities in regards to how you can interact with the world. There are not many physical characters in the game to interact with. Most of the face-to-face situations take place between you and the landlord of the tenement building that the game's set in, but there are still plenty of people to talk to around the building. Most of the tenants in the building have something to say, with branching dialogue trees that can steer the conversations in certain ways. The variety of people in this building is pretty interesting, from a paranoid tenant scared to leave his apartment in case he catches the illness nanophage, to a girl that was scared to be seen talking to you because her boyfriend will beat her up if she gets caught. These conversations are not paramount to the game and don't usually need to be done, but they provide context to the game world and help build up the intimate story of day-to-day life within the dystopian hellhole of this world. You have access to augmented reality equipment that can switch between biovision, which scans for biological evidence like bodily fluids, and the electromagnetic vision that is used to scan electronic devices. With these, Daniel is able to scan the surrounding areas for objects that can be interacted with. It works very similarly to how the phone does in Condemned, if you've ever played that. Once you come in contact with a crime scene, you must use the electromagnetic vision to locate the brain implant of the victim and hack. This is by far the best aspect of the game in my opinion. You get transported to a visual representation of memory fragments that are jumbled up and completely out of context. But what's cool is how the developers have used this in a clever way. In reality, memories that are stored in your head only keep the important information intact, and the rest becomes blurry. In Observer, that's exactly what these segments are like. You'll see the important details from the memory, but with the rest stripped away. At first, this can seem really chaotic, with the amount of random information that gets jumbled up and fired into your view. But once you start to make your way through, fragments of memories will start to form, and the puzzle slowly starts to unravel its pieces. The way that the developers used how our brains process memories and made it into a visual representation is outstanding in my opinion. All the emotions get represented from happy to euphoric, and even frightened, are a real roller coaster to wade through. These segments of the game would lend themselves amazingly to VR. Once the memories have been scanned and processed, you have to use what you've learned to figure out the next step. Though the game is pretty linear, it does rely on the player to remember what was told or shown to them in order to progress. So this makes the monotony of walking from point A to B feel more like actual investigations rather than a guided story, even though deep down that's what the game is at heart. There are enemies in the game, but they are the type that must be avoided rather than confronted. You have this heavy stepping, heavy breathing monster with bright lights for eyes, and sections of its body replaced by machinery. These parts can be tense, but also depending on what else is going on, can just end up being a nuisance and just a hurdle to the next part of the game. Almost like it was put there just to pad out the playtime. But when it works really well, especially in conjunction with the sound design and when they start to play with your vision and making it even more tense. Overall, the gameplay is pretty bare bones, but it's serviceable to what the game requires you to do. This is a game that wants you to walk instead of run. Take in what's around you and immerse yourself in the lives of the people living in the tenement buildings. This title has your typical type of look for the type of game that it is. Everything's dirty, it's raining all the time, it's dark even when it's morning, and there's neon everywhere. It's nothing stand out, but what's there is polished and looks like it should be there. It's the very typical look of the engine used, with that being the Unreal Engine. A lot of places are covered with this kind of augmented reality overlay that can sometimes look like something out of the Matrix. This is used as a kind of guide in some instances, where it blocks access to certain areas, as well as highlighting little bits of information. There are even ornaments that are just digital representations of the real thing scattered around the place. The walls are now like interactive message boards with random stuff being presented on them, or they just look like a glitchy mess of flickering and blinking on and off, like an old shop sign. But to sum up the look of the world in this game in a word, it'd be dire. Everything that's not neon is drab and devoid of colour. The environment has a look of necessity over style, function over form. The walls and ceilings have pipes sticking out of them. There are even screens in certain places that look like old CRT monitors, even though they have all this digital stuff surrounding everything. This later on can work against you because everything looks the same as everything else. This can make you feel as if you're walking in circles and make it easy to get lost. There are visual indicators that help you figure out where you're going, like the door numbers on the residents' houses, or green lights showing you a path that's not yet been taken. But just a change in textures would have made a massive difference, as well as making it easier to navigate. There are not many characters that are fully modelled in the game, but what's there is interesting. The rest of the people that you interact with are hidden behind the front door of their house, with conversations taking place over a video feed on the front door. Each door has a different personality behind it, and a kind of animated avatar to represent them that have a weird modern art look to them, but the graphics really shine in the dream segments. I'll let a few scenes play out, because seeing it is much better than explaining it. Observer takes full advantage of sound to make a very creepy and surreal experience. I played it in 5.1 surround sound and the effect was amazingly engaging. The ambient sounds give the game a sense of horror and the weird feeling that you're being watched. Most of what you hear is sound effects like rain hitting the surface or creaking floorboards. Using the scanning equipment makes you almost feel like you're the predator with the way it looks and sounds. The music is quite typical for the kind of game that it is. Melancholic drones acting as a backdrop to a recovering world. Sometimes the music will just swell low frequency sounds that can really make your hairs stand up in anticipation. The music is also used as an indicator for the monster that is around from time to time. It's a nice addition that keeps the flow of the game up rather than things just keep coming completely at random. It also helps build tension as you know something is there and after you, but you have no clue where. Rutger Hauer does a good job as Daniel, but nothing that can hold a candle to his performance of Roy Batty in Blade Runner. He sounds like he's old and seen it all before. but this can sometimes also go the other way. There are times when his emotions should be one way, but the performance doesn't match. Like you would see something that would normally really upset and distress you, and he kinda talks casually about it. But it's not bad in any sense, but nothing amazing either, which is a letdown considering the talent that they got in for the game. The NPCs on the other hand are really well done. Each character puts across the exact emotion that they're feeling, whilst you only have a weird display of them to look at. These are some of the more interesting aspects of the game, and give you interesting conversations that have different outcomes depending on your choice of words. The most interesting person to speak to, however, is the landlord. He speaks in a weird, broken way, almost like he has to process each word before he says it. The conversations with him will take a little more time for him to speak, but they always seem to hold my interest no matter how slow or odd what he actually said is. Observer is a game with big ideas but no real way of seeing them through to the end. The game presents you with an amazing world and brilliant premise along with gameplay that is unique and well thought out. But sadly, seeing it through to the end left me disappointed and wanting more. What could have been a conspiratorial trip into a world where people are slaves to augmentations and digital merging with what's physical, all controlled by mega corporations, turning into nothing more than a simple walking simulator with a few cool ideas. The story is built up in a way that makes it seem as if it's on a grander scale than it actually is, and the ending is no better. Without spoiling anything, the ending comes down to a choice, neither of them having much significance to the game. It feels as though it was an ending slapped on just because it needed one, which made it fall flat in my opinion. The gameplay also suffers from the same thing. It starts amazing but peters off into essentially walking around the same looking environments, not sure if you're going the right way as everything looks the same. Things start to become monotonous around the 60% mark. Luckily the Dream Eater segments save this game from being average. These segments really do make the game worth playing, and makes me really want a larger game based around this style of gameplay. So overall I'd say this game is worth a go if you can get it for a decent price, which it actually is at the moment on most platforms. The ideas this game presents could be a catalyst for something greater the next time around. But as for this game, it's an interesting experiment that done what it wanted to do really well whilst doing other things just averagely. If this looks like something that would appeal to you, then it probably would, like it did me. As long as you're not expecting more than it has to offer, you will enjoy this psychological trip into a world of the Observer.